1982 was a massive year in music. It was the year of mega chart singles like Eye of the Tiger by Survivor, Physical by the late Olivia Newton-John, and I Love Rock and Roll by Joan Jett and the Blackhearts. There are also big blockbuster albums like Men at Work's Business as Usual, Prince 1999, Duran Duran's Rio, even Michael Jackson's Thriller came out at the end of the year. By that time, MTV was getting to full throttle, forcing artists to be more visual, but nothing can defeat the power of a perfect song. And to me, there was a perfect song that rose above all the fanfare. Though it stalled just outside of the top 5, it had a sonic quality that could whisk you away to a higher musical plateau. It's by an artist that was tired of being labeled with the latest buzzword. He hated music videos. He just wanted to write great songs. He took a huge risk. He did it his way. And this is the story. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. If you know which Beatle is truly the walrus, you're going to dig this channel. Make sure that you subscribe below to be a part of this community of music lovers. And if you have a second, check out our Patreon page. It helps us to do more interviews, to do more videos. So it's time for another edition of our series, number 1 in our hearts, one of my favorite shows we do on here. This is where we get to honor a song. It was so great, it should have been a number 1 hit on the Billboard Hot 100. If life was fair. Came up short. In the case of this next song, it was a song that came pretty close. It was truly a revelation at the time because its mysterious arrangement and its lyrical resonance stood out in contrast to all the other songs in the charts at that time, to me. Once you hear its haunting piano melody, it's entrenched in your mind, and it's a good thing. Talking about Joe Jackson's top 10 hit, Steppin' Out. Joe Jackson grew up in the working class community of Paulsgrove, England. He was diagnosed with asthma when he was just 3 years old, a condition that he struggled with well into his 20s. His asthmatic condition made sports too difficult for a young Joe, so he became a voracious reader, and then he turned to music. Now, as an adolescent, Joe developed a passion for 30s and 40s swing music, also classical. He learned to play the violin at age 11. When he was an early teen, his parents scraped enough money to buy him a used piano. Joe took lessons and he quickly became a very proficient player, so much so that he began playing in pubs when he was only 16. Joe's first band was actually called Edward Bear, not to be confused with a Canadian band of the same name, who had a number 3 pop hit on the Billboard Hot 100 chart in '72 as a tune called Last Song.
It's the last song I'll ever write.
In 1978, Joe Jackson was signed by A&M Records and promptly formed the Joe Jackson Band that performed as a unit on Joe's debut album, Look Sharp, released in 1979. A real classic of the 70s. The first single from Look Sharp was Is She Really Going Out With Him? Featured a clever back and forth narrative with Joe singing in a conversational style.
Is she really going out with him?
Framing a humorous storyline with lyrics like, here comes Jeannie with her new boyfriend. They say that looks don't count for much. If so,
They say the looks don't count for much, so there goes your proof.
great song. We actually should cover that one. Is She Really Going Out With Him was initially released in 1978, but it flopped. A&M reissued the single in 1979 to latch onto the emerging popularity of the New Wave movement. And the second run became Joe's international breakthrough.
Is she really gonna take him home tonight?
Now, the second coming of Is She Really Going Out With Him, that climbed to number 13 in the UK, and it went to number 9 in Canada. It actually went to number 21 on the Billboard Hot 100, and it really set Joe apart from the rest of the pack. Look Sharp was followed by the LP I'm the Man, which included his highest charting hit in the UK with the single It's Different for Girls. That actually reached number 5, but the cut didn't bust the Hot 100 in the States, surprisingly. In 1980, Joe's third studio album, Beat Crazy, was released. It was the last album to be credited as the Joe Jackson Band. For Beat Crazy, Joe tried to mix things up, break away from what he perceived as the format of the first 2 albums. This record was a departure from the earlier albums, with reggae and ska stylings. Just didn't catch on with the record-buying public, or with radio for that matter. Joe felt that Beat Crazy was unsuccessful because the band lacked clear focus during the recording sessions. He stated that Beat Crazy represented a desperate attempt to make some sense of rock and roll. Deep in our hearts, we knew it was doomed to failure, is what he said. It was the first time over 3 albums where none of the singles became a hit in the US or the UK. By 1981, it was clear that Joe Jackson needed an interval, and he found a little bit of comfort with his 4th release, Jumpin' Jive. It was a record that allowed Joe to just have fun. He reinterpreted classic swing and jump blues ditties originally done by some of his heroes from the 40s. There were new versions of songs by Cab Calloway, Louis Jordan, and Skeets Tolbert. Come on, boys, let's have a ball. It was a huge risk, but sold pretty well and brought back music that had long since passed. I think it gave him some motivation. After that Jumpin' Jive frolic, Joe needed to concentrate on composing a record that would put him on a career course that was artistically satisfying, as well as commercially viable. He wanted to make a path that would bust him out of the post-punk new wave corner that the music industry had painted him into. Like I said before, Joe loathed the category. He didn't like labels. He didn't like being compared constantly to other artists who were lumped into the second UK invasion, like Elvis Costello and Graham Parker. Actually, Elvis Costello, he also cringed with the typical labeling by music pundits. Now, in '82, Joe was at a crossroads professionally and personally. I guess he went through a bitter divorce and he decided to leave England. He fled to New York City. And he did this in search of musical enlightenment, also a rejuvenated spirit. Joe sublet a flat in the East Village, and he loved hanging out at the city's Latin and jazz clubs. Big inspiration for him. Joe Jackson was completely enthralled by New York City, and his exuberance ruminated the idea of a concept album that would capture the nonstop energy of the city that never sleeps. He visualized making a 2-sided record with the songs running together, creating a 24-hour experience that epitomized the New York City vibe. So Joe came up with Night and Day as the name of the new LP, of course borrowing a title from a Cole Porter song. Side 1 would represent the night and side 2 the day. On every corner of the Big Apple, Joe Jackson inhaled inspiration, and he fell into what he called a hot love affair with the city. The wide-eyed excitement that Joe felt going out on the town, that was poured into the track, Steppin' Out, the lead single from his future masterpiece, Night and Day. Steppin' Out was an expression that originated from the Manhattan party scene of the 1930s. And this title, Joe wanted to conjure up the gleam of the neon lights, the feel of cabbing from club to club, taking in the city's thrilling vitality, like a couple all dressed up and going to CBGB or the Village Gate. He also imagined what he called a romantic ballad set to a disco beat. It would be a record with virtually no guitars, unlike songs from his previous work. In his mind's eye, Steppin' Out would ultimately be a soundtrack of expressing the cultural euphoria of the 40s with a modern twist. With Steppin' Out and its supporting album, Joe Jackson was in lockstep with the ghosts of Cole Porter and George Gershwin in the rock era. First of all, he played nearly every instrument on the recording of Steppin' Out. This included Joe playing a Fender Rhodes piano, acoustic grand piano, a Yamaha CP80 keyboard, a Hammond organ, gem organ, synthesizers, even the alto sax. The only exception was Larry Tolfree, who played a real snare drum that was overdubbed on top of a fake snare. The rest of the drum section on Steppin' Out was played on a Korg KR55 drum machine. Very new technology then. Jackson was a big fan of the band Kraftwerk, particularly the electronic dance beats and bass riffs found on their Computer World album. That That was the sound that he was seeking for Steppin' Out. He wanted an infectious, electrifying melody. To achieve the groove that he was looking for, Joe and co-producer David Kirschenbaum, they layered the drum machine with a Prophet 5 synthesizer that served as the song's bass line, pervading a precise and metronomic sound, throughout the track's arrangement. Joe Jackson, he also used a Boss DR55 drum machine to get that continuous beat that we all hear. All Joe had to do was press the button marked club beat. Very cool. One of the production elements that makes Steppin' Out such a riveting, intoxicating track is the tinkling bell-like effect elicited by a classical instrument, of course known as glockenspiel. So a little history here, it's kind of fun. The roots of the glockenspiel go clear back to the 1700s with George Friedrich Handel, who is believed to be the first to incorporate the instrument into a musical arrangement. Handel used it in his oratorio Saul in 1739. The glockenspiel was also utilized to represent Papagino's Magic Bells in Mozart's two-act opera, The Magic Flute, in 1791. The glockenspiel certainly provided that magic touch in the recording of Steppin' Out. I mean, the idea to include it was just a stroke of genius by Joe Jackson. The synthesized bass line and jazzy block chords accented with the chime of the metal bars on a glockenspiel was a delicious recipe that created Steppin' Out's wispy, mesmerizing consonance. Look and dry your eyes. Joe Jackson is a very underrated vocalist, in my opinion. He has this unique, unaffected resonance with a torchy sincerity, and it's just perfection on Steppin' Out, as Joe has all of us hanging on to his every vocal nuance, his every word. No more angry words to say can come alive. David Kirschenbaum used a British Cowrick mic to record Joe's vocal on Steppin' Out. That specific microphone captured a pure, authentic Joe Jackson vocal performance, ensuring against over-processing or slickness that have hurt some recordings from that actual time. Apparently, Joe has always found it challenging to write lyrics for his songs. The lyrics on Steppin' Out, amazing. They were intuitive and had nothing to do with Joe's personal introspection. According to Joe, the lyrics just felt right. Actually, I want to talk about the lyrics from Steppin' Out for just a second. The first line from the song has always knocked me out poetically. The mist across the window hides the lines. The mist across the window hides the lines, but nothing hides the color of the lights that shine. Electricity so fine, look and dry your eyes. So fine, look and dry your eyes. Just love it. Another of the passages in Steppin' Out that I just find incredibly insightful is in verse 3. We are young, but getting old before our time. We'll leave the TV and the radio behind. Don't you wonder what we'll find? Steppin' Out tonight. We'll leave the TV and the radio behind. It's just about adventure. True words of wisdom from Joe Jackson. How liberating it was back in the day to leave the TV and the radio behind and get out in the world to experience, or discover something new. In this case, the beautiful city of New York. The mist across the window hides the light. Today, that would be equivalent to leaving our cell phone or our laptop at home. Unthinkable, right? How would we ever have the self-control to do that? And yet, we used to do it all the time. We need to do that more than ever right now. Get away from all the clutter in our lives and dwell in the wonderment of the moment. The magic of exploration and imagination. And that's partly what Joe Jackson's intention was with the concept of his album Night and Day. It was supposed to be, like I said, experiencing New York City over a 24-hour period. The classic New York City, full of opportunity and wonderment. This song is the synthesis of that whole idea, exploration and imagination. The first time I heard the haunting melody of this song, I was whisked away from my Idaho small town and just delivered to another dimension entirely. And in a yellow taxi turned to me. especially when he says, "We, so tired of all the darkness in our lives, with no more angry words to say can come alive."
Words to say can come alive.
Get into a car and drive to the other side. Me, babe, stepping out into the night, into the light. It was such a relief, this song, a relief of the senses, an alternative to worry and the anxiety of the scary world outside. I mean, as a child, to hear Joe Jackson sing about driving to the other side, into the night, into the light, it was an escape to a world elegantly painted by the crispness of Jackson's voice, the wondrous imagery, and the piano mixed with that glockenspiel. It's always brought me a sense of comfort. It overrides my anxiety and just delivers a source of contentment that few songs have equaled. It's an escape that I can still turn to today. Night and Day is indeed a brilliant album, where each of the songs segue together with no track pause in the grooves of the vinyl. It was conceptual art that it's been lost in the age of digital downloads. Steppin' Out closes outside one, the night portion of Night and Day, preceded brilliantly by the lively salsa-flavored track Target, I might say, that fuses entrancingly into Steppin' Out's snappy beat pattern.
No one's fussy, I'm a target.
Joe Jackson is a crusader for artistic purity. On the flip side, he finds the superficiality of the music business abhorrent. Although he had fun with the sarcasm and parody of his early videos, by the 80s, Joe had an aversion to doing music videos. He believed in '83 that MTV was beginning to have a negative effect on music. After filming what he deemed as a crappy video for the beautiful ballad from Night and Day, Breaking Us in Two.
Always something breaking us.
Joe refused to make music videos, even though he knew it would damage his career. He would actually go on to say in an interview in 1984, "Rock and roll is degenerating into a big circus, and videos and MTV are very much a part of that. People who are seriously interested in making music as an end in itself are going to have to split away and forge a different path." In my view, Joe Jackson is one of the only artists who had, and really still has, an air of mystery. He's one of the most mysterious figures in modern pop history. Regardless, Joe seems very much like a man of principle, and he will not compromise his integrity. It's one of the traits that has made his music so convincing and really everlasting. Jackson's unmitigated artistry was recognized by tastemakers and critics when Steppin' Out was nominated for Record of the Year and Best Pop Vocal Performance Male at the Grammy Awards in 1983. Very cool. His superb musicianship was further recognized when Joe won a Grammy in 2001 for Best Pop Instrumental Album for his progressive rock classical music hybrid, Symphony 1, that was released in 1999. Steppin' Out truly dazzled listeners around the world. It went to number 5 in Canada. It was actually Joe Jackson's second biggest hit in England. It rose all the way to number 6. Went to number 4 on the adult contemporary chart. It went to number 7 on the mainstream rock chart, and it soared to number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100, as I said, making it a triple threat. It's actually Joe's biggest hit in America, which is no small feat. In my opinion, it should have been a number 1 hit. It actually peaked at number 6 for almost a month. The songs at number 1 during that peak were Mickey by Tony Basil for 1 week, Daryl Hall and John Oates with Maneater for several weeks. Maneater was at number 1 for 4 weeks, so in my alternate reality, I would wish that the most successful duo of all time would trade spots with Joe Jackson for just 1 week. But in the reality that we all live in, it's just going to have to be number 1 in our hearts.
Yellow taxi, turn to me and smile.
Here we are decades later, and it still evokes cinematic exhilaration, with its luxuriously layered melody and its lyrical escapism. Without fail, it always transports me to a magical dimension of sound and vision. I've heard it thousands of times. I still can't see through it. I still can't unlock its mysteries. I still have no idea what some of the lyrics mean. I don't think I ever will. It's a mystery, a pop riddle packed inside of the most satisfying piano melody that these ears have ever heard. Perfectly titled. I mean, when you listen to this perfect slice of 80s pop, you're truly stepping out into the sonic unknown. Leave us a comment about this masterpiece of the 80s. I can't say enough about it. About Joe Jackson, about this immaculate piano melody. What are some songs that transport you? What are the other songs should we cover on this program? Let us know in the comments. If you dig this content, we do invite you to subscribe below. We would love to have you as part of our community. Look us up on Patreon to be a part of keeping the music alive. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.